Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to go ahead and take your seats? And everyone kind of move up to the front. And we can be seated in the front left. Could I ask everyone to turn phones to silent mode? Funeral service will be conducted by Rabbi Rachel Heath.
isn't it for everyone else to know there is someone if you listen, and that both of us are true at the same time. And so, just like everything that we do in Judaism, comes with a blessing. So I ask you to repeat after me. Baruch atah Adonai Hadayan Ha'emet. Blessed are you, Judge of truth. Wanting to be able to first, sometimes it can be a little to start. Sometimes it might be easier for the side. I can keep my hand.
Starter, I think, right there.
It's in between the. Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit that our loved ones give to us, they cannot be measured, cannot be weighed, nor can they even be tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and some of their warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage, and in the fullness of time, bringing us to healing and peace. And so we gather to remember Rosalyn Raffe and join our hearts together. Mourning is a time filled with many emotions and sweet. And so we begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Roz's life with the millennia-old tradition and then the eternity of the people of Israel and God. Our rabbis taught that there are 3 crowns that any of us could wear at any time in our lives. The crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But they emphasized that the crown of a good name exceeds them all. The book of Ecclesiastes says, Tov Shem Shem Tov. A good name is to be treasured above precious oil. Wealth, health, even life pass away. Lasting memorials. They will be remembered and revered for the kindness they have shown, for the love they have given, and they are shining examples of what it means to be a village. The Jewish tradition knows that in moments of loss, it can be hard to find the right words to say, even as much as we might want to. We want to bring words of comfort, words of memory, words of love. And when we just lose someone as central to family, as central to community, as Rosalyn, right words. And so instead, the tradition gives us some words that just begin to open our hearts, begin the process of telling stories, to begin giving us a path forward. And perhaps the most familiar of these is the 23rd Psalm, also known as the Shepherd's Song. And what I love about this song is that the psalmist describes God as a shepherd, as a constant presence, a comfort, a guide, exactly in the ways that Roz was. Maybe not the loudest, needing to always take up space, but always present and gathering her flock around her. But the psalmist also describes moments of fear in their lives and says Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And what I love about this is in the original Hebrew, for you are with me, stays a little ambiguous. It doesn't specify God the shepherd as being with the psalmist. Instead, it just leaves it as you. And I always take the psalm and imagine it as God is present, but the true presence that we haul into these moments are people like Roz, people who are always there, people who are always a comfort and a strength, people who always knew that sometimes it could be hard to find your community all the way in the city and therefore needing to recreate the thing that you could need is within arm's reach. Whether it's a person or a book or a piece of news, that even when we are feeling like we live in a shadow, Roz remains with us. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The 23rd Psalm. Adonai rohi lo estar bino deshayar mitzeni alei menuchot yenachaleni nafshi Lo ira rakiata imadi Shivtecha umishantecha b'mayanachamuni ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorai T'shanta Hashem eroshi. Often not notice those blessings that are right in front of us. And it takes moments, it takes coming together, it takes a meal or a brownie to be able to really know that someone in our lives is someone that is filled with blessing. Roz was never someone who you needed to have an occasion to see. She was just always there. She was volunteering, she was a part of her community, she was always a guide for her children. And I think that that term, a woman of valor, was exactly the way that people would see her. And so we read this psalm as well together. A woman of valor, who can find? Her worth is far above jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity, and cheerfully faces whatever may come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She tends to the affairs of her household and eats not the bread of illness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband, too, he praises her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a God-fearing woman is much to be praised. Place before her the fruit of her hands. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. The Jewish tradition often focuses on actions of loving kindness, of gimilut chasadim, that we build a world that is better for our children and the next generation, even better than the one that we ourselves received. Judaism also focuses on the actions of commandments and being able to show our connection with God and our connection with the world by fulfilling those commandments. What I have always found particularly curious about Judaism is at a time when we most want to bring that blessing and that honor, that loving kindness to someone who means so much, we're not given a list of actions to do. We're not given commandments or really even suggestions of how we most honor a woman like Roz. Instead, we're told to do just one thing, and that's to tell stories. To tell stories of a woman who had 95 years of amazing life. Someone who made sure that every day was a day worth living. And though we wouldn't be able to tell her whole life story in just this one moment, we begin that process because it keeps us with her and it keeps her with us in our hearts, in the words that we speak, and all the more so in the acts that we do in her honor because she taught us how. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem, Adonai Mavarach. God has given and God has taken away. Death and sorrow are not strangers to those of us gathered to honor Roz. With Job we say, Adonai Natan, God you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, God you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into a beacon of trust with which we affirm Roz's love. Rosalyn Raffe, a woman who lived for 95 years with intelligence, devotion, curiosity, and a quiet resolve. 95 years is not simply a measure of time. It's a life that stretched across generations, historical shifts, and cultural change. And through all of it, Roz remained deeply rooted in who she was and what mattered most to her. Roz grew up in a family defined by connection. She was one of more than 20 first cousins, raised in a world where a family was not something you had to schedule, but something that you always belonged to. With her grandmother living with her and her family, Roz's childhood home functioned almost like an open house, especially on Sundays when relatives would come and drop by simply because the door was open. Family was always the backdrop of her life. When that older generation passed, Roz felt a responsibility, not because anyone assigned it to her, but because she believed in continuity. She stepped into that natural role of connector. She organized luncheons for the women of her family, making sure that people stayed in touch. She kept names, relationships, and most importantly, stories alive. She understood something essential, that families don't stay close by accident. They stay close because someone cared enough to hold the center. One of the most remarkable examples was this instinct even happened years later, halfway around the world. Roz had answered almost a cold call from a long-lost cousin who was an amateur genealogist. And together they helped to grow this family tree. Years later, Minda and her husband were able, while on vacation in South Africa, to discover that on vacation at a random table, sitting with random strangers, turns out that they were also cousins because of this family tree. Moments like that don't happen by chance. They happen because Roz believed that knowing where you come from matters, that family history is not something to be taken as trivial. It is our inheritance. Roz's life was also defined by partnership. She was married to Roger, and together they built a steady, committed life that was rooted in shared values and mutual respect. Their marriage reflected the rhythms of their time. It was a home of routine, of dependability, and quiet devotion. They traveled together, explored the world, and made thoughtful choices about where and how they lived. As a mother, Roz was deeply devoted to Minda and Ron. She believed her primary responsibility in life was raising her children. She took that responsibility incredibly seriously. She was present, perceptive, and fiercely protective, especially when it mattered. Her children often say that they never really got away with anything. Not because she was harsh, but because she was always aware. She saw them through some tough situations. She was able to understand people, and when something was wrong, especially when it involved fairness or dignity, she spoke up. There are stories of letters written and calls made when schools or institution maybe crossed a line that they didn't know that they shouldn't have crossed. Roz didn't need to be loud, she didn't need to be combative, but she was firm. She believed that standing up for your children and for your values, that was the work of being a parent. Roz was also at her core a reader. Someone who learned through words and ideas. Reading wasn't just a pastime for her. It was how she stayed engaged with the world. She read widely. Novels, nonfiction, history, current events. She belonged to a mystery book group that began as a class and then evolved into years-long friendships. When even a new Daniel Silva novel came out, she made sure she had it. Often reading it on her Nook, which she had mastered probably long before many people her age had considered trying. She read the Chicago Tribune faithfully for decades, and then later she would read the New York Times online. On Sunday mornings, she watched multiple news programs, back to back, interested in not just those headlines, but in real understanding events and looking at it from different perspectives. She was really intellectually curious, discerning. She was engaged. She didn't read to escape. She read in order to understand it. And that curiosity showed up in so many places in her life. She painted. She studied calligraphy and Japanese brush painting. She dried flowers that she grew herself in the garden. She designed centerpieces, planned events, managed finances with precision and with care. She was, in Phi Beta Kappa, mathematically minded. She was creative and logical in equal measure. She was someone who didn't need or pursue recognition. Instead, she pursued mastery, quietly learning how things worked and doing them well. At age 70, when most people hesitate maybe to learn something new and when computers were just becoming a thing, Roz received her computer and embraced it fully. She enrolled in classes. She taught herself what she needed to know. She adapted with ease. Well into her 90s, she was still Instacarting groceries with fierce independence. She didn't chase novelty, she embraced the usefulness. And if something helped her stay connected and informed, then that's what she wanted to understand. Roz gave countless hours to her volunteer, especially through Hadassah. And again, she wasn't just someone who participated, she was someone who built. When traveling town became impractical for women who were raising families in the suburbs, Roz and others took that bold step and helped to establish the North. And later, when women were moving north out of the city, she was able to ensure that an organization as important as Hadassah had a future because they were already there. She served in leadership roles, she handled those finances, she planned programs, and offered insight wherever it was needed. Roz was warm, she was friendly, she was approachable, someone who could engage easily. But she was probably most effective in those smaller groups, where everyone knew that her voice truly carried weight and her judgment was trusted. People recognized quickly that she was thoughtful, she was capable, and she was deeply reliable. In later years, after a fall limited her physical independence, Roz continued to adapt. With the help of her devoted caregivers like Nora, Mickey, Ella, and Kudi, and the constant presence of her children, Minda and Ron, she continued to live with dignity. She continued all of her routines, and she continued to live with that deep sense of caring. Those caregivers were a part of her rhythms, of a part of her everyday. They knew her preferences, her routines. They helped continue to bring her comfort. And Roz's family remains deeply grateful for the compassion and steadiness they gave to her. She found peace in those daily rituals, watching the news, following sports, listening to music, taking drives along Sheridan Road, just to look out at Lake Michigan. Even as her physical world might have narrowed, her inner world remained rich, informed, and engaged. This week's Torah portion, Vayera, speaks powerfully to Roz's life. At the beginning of the portion, Moses expresses a sense of overwhelmedness. He begins to doubt himself. He wonders whether anything he do will truly matter. And God responds not with a spectacle, but with reassurance that's rooted in continuity. I was with your ancestors, God says. I am with you now, and I will be with those who come after. Vayera reminds us that redemption does not always arrive dramatically. Often it unfolds through persistence, through people who show up, who take responsibility, keep faith with others even if progress feels slow. The Torah emphasizes God's faithfulness across generations and calls on human beings to mirror that faithfulness in how Roz lived that teaching. She was faithful to family, to community, to learning, and to the values that she believed in. She did not need recognition. She did not need applause from being someone that others could rely on, to learn from, someone that others could trust. Today we mourn her loss, and we also give thanks. Thanks for a life lived with intention, with intelligence, and with care. The stories that she shared, that she created, will continue to be told. The connections that she nurtured will continue to endure. And the values that she embodied will continue to guide those who loved her. May Roz's memory be bound up in the bond of eternal life. And may her curiosity and devotion continue to inspire all who knew her, all that knew you, all that continue to be embraced by her love. And may her memory always be a blessing. Zichrona livracha. Even as it feels impossible to encapsulate an entire life in a few stories or a few moments. Our tradition knows that those blessings are what we most need to focus on. And when we raise up the best part of someone, we raise up the best part of ourselves. Roz lived her life every day like that, seeing those moments, seeing those blessings that we all intrinsically hold in our souls, and making sure that they had a space to flourish. And so our tradition gives us more blessings, more prayers to be able to help us, to be able to help us be and live in a life of wonderment. And I believe that the two prayers that come during a time where pain and loss is so acute and so new, they're meant to be in pair. They're meant to be in partnership. The first prayer, El Malei Rachamim, is a prayer that asks God to bring Roz into God's loving care, to always be in her presence, and for Roz to always be in God's. It calls her a light, and it asks for her light to continue to shine. And the second prayer that we'll recite as we bring Roz to her resting place is Kadisha Tom, Mourner's Kaddish. And oddly enough, this is not a prayer that speaks of death. In fact, it never mentions it. It's a prayer that speaks of blessing. And it's a prayer that sees the goodness in all of us and asks us to raise that up. It's a prayer that says that that continuity of generations is what helps us be and live lives of blessing. I think that these prayers are meant to be in partnership because the first one, El Malei Rachamim, becomes our prayer for Roz. And just as importantly, the second, Kadisha Tom, becomes Roz's prayer for all of us, that we continue to live in her honor and in her legacy, lives of blessing. And so, as we turn to El Malei Rachamim, I ask that everyone rise as they are able. El Malei Rachamim, Shochim Bamromim, Amsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim U'Adorim, Kezohar Harakim HaMasirim, Nishmat Rosalyn Raffe shel halcha le'olama ba'al harachamim yastireha b'seter knafav le'olamim Bitror hachayim and nishmata Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom amishkava v'nomar Amen. On the inside of our pamphlets, we read the translation of El Malei Rachamim together. Compassionate God, who has entered eternity, O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. Please be seated. As we move from words of story and words of blessing, it feels right that as we carry Roz to her resting place, we let one of her loves, music, carry us there as well. Music mattered to Roz, and especially classical music. It was one of the ways that she stayed connected to beauty and to emotion and the world beyond our words. For someone who loved reading, art, and ideas, music was another language, one that didn't require explanation, only attention. And so we're going to take some time to listen to one of her favorites, Clair de Lune, composed by Claude Debussy. The piece was inspired by poetry and by the artistic world of its time, a period when composers, writers, and painters were all exploring light, atmosphere, and feeling rather than the sharp edges or certainty. Clair de Lune doesn't push forward, it drifts, it reflects, and it invites stillness. As we listen, imagine that you're sitting in a car, hopefully on a day warmer than today, hopefully on a day a little bit sunnier. The windows are open, and you're driving along Sheridan Road, heading towards Glencoe Beach. The lake comes into view, wide and steady, meeting sky at the horizon. There's no rush and no agenda. It's just a quiet rhythm of the drive, and the sound of music bringing comfort of being together. Let this be a moment of reflection, of memory, and of gratitude. If images come, let them come. If emotions rise, rise. And if all that comes in stillness, then know that that too is prayer. May this music hold what words cannot.
ladies and gentlemen, this is going to conclude the service here. The cemetery workers are going to take the casket up to where the crypt is, and they're going to prepare it for the children. We're going to remain down here while they do that. And so Cynthia, we can go. Stop, please. So no. It's going to be about probably 5-10 minutes. There's a washroom, man's room here, ladies' room. So Claire DeLune was played at a funeral that I attended for, and a great hero. And Brady and Aggie were this beautiful older couple that I met when I was in Fort Myers, Florida. And they were very good friends with my second wife's family. And Brady got pancreatic cancer and very stoic. And my wife and I decided to go through in vitro fertilization. I had after my first marriage, I had a vasectomy. And we entered the marriage with not going to be any children, but I felt bad. I wanted to give her a child. So we started with a clinic in Miami. We would drive from Fort Myers to Miami every single day. 3 hours there, 3 hours back. The funeral was that children swam out to the middle of the pond and they dispersed his ashes. And a nice lobster dinner. It was just really nice to be included with their family. We came back, we started going every day to Miami, and we went ahead and we planted 2 embryos and 1 took. 3 months into it, we went to have a test called the CBS test, which is a month earlier than amniocentesis. And it's basically to make sure that there's wrong with the child genetically. And when we got to the doctor's office, when he walked in, I could tell there was something wrong. He looked at the nurse and he looked at the woman who was doing the ultrasound, and he said, the baby's in the pelvic cavity, it's supposed to be down. So I tried to move the baby, but my wife couldn't tolerate it. So he says, well, I can't do the test because it has to be in the pelvic cavity, but I don't want to worry about it. He's almost never incarcerated. And he leaves. And the nurse and the technician look at each other and they said, you have to go find another doctor. So I got on the internet. This is back in 1997 when the internet was nowhere near what it was now. 2007. And I found a doctor up in New Bedford, Massachusetts, who had written a 30-page article about incarcerated uteruses. So I contacted him. He was an emeritus professor at Tufts. And he reluctantly agreed to see us. So we flew up on September 11th to Providence, Rhode Island, stayed with Aggie, who was in Dartmouth. Then we drove to Springfield, Massachusetts. And the doctor who went ahead and brought us in, the ultrasound tech, and he was like, can they do anything in Fort Myers? He's like, this is one of the 2 worst cases of an incarcerated uterus I've ever seen. He says, do you need anything? And Sherry said, yes. I want you to go check into a hotel, don't need anything else. And he brought us in his office and he said, I want you to know we're going to try to do this in the labor delivery room, but we have an operating room on standby because between your life and the baby's life, I'm saving your life. And then it got real fast. So he introduced us to this Israeli doctor, it was Rosh Hashanah, and I thanked the doctor for coming in on Rosh Hashanah. I'm permitted. I said, I know it's called love. I know it's called love. But we're looking for fresh. So the 2 doctors, 2 nurses, and an anesthesiologist took her in after they did a total spinal block. The doctor made me promise not to come in. And standing there's 2 doors with a slightest little light, and I'm like, I'm waiting. The lights turn off for a while. The doctor comes out and walks right up to me and he says, I'm sorry. hotel and set up tomorrow morning, and I'll do another ultrasound, and everything looks good, I'll let you know. So it took all day for the anesthesiologist, for anesthetic to wear off. We made that hotel, we came back, and the doctor, everything looks good, you want to know the sex? And we're like, yeah, it's a boy. And my wife, who was an only child, goes, a boy, what am I going to do with the boy? So we drove back to Springfield, Massachusetts, and Aggie, she's Portuguese, and she's like, Portuguese tradition is whenever you come back from the hospital, you must have a chicken dinner. So she makes us this chicken dinner, like a Thanksgiving dinner. The next day she said, why don't we go out to the pond? So I went with her and we bought 3 all day. The corn was amazing. The next day we're flying back, and I said, you know, part of the reason why I wanted to come up here was to see Aggie. I think we should name him Rainey. She goes, that would be great. Can we use my grandfather's middle name, Alton? I said, of course. Her grandfather was on the second wave from Iwo Jima and served in Korea. I said, of course. So fast forward, March 16th, 2008. She's very hard delivery, but she delivers. Beautiful boy, and like everybody, I started crying like a baby when I had it. So, stayed with her that day, went home to take care of the dogs. I called her the next day, Aggie's here. And oh my God, I wanted to be there. And I said, I'll be right over. So I jumped in the car and I ran over. And then Fort Myers Health Park Hospital, it's a beautiful hospital. It's beautiful. And she gives me a hug, and she goes, I worked in a children's hospital for many, many years, and this is the most beautiful child I have ever seen. And thank you so much for naming him Rainey. And as she says that, the person playing the grand piano starts playing Claire de Lune, which was played at Rainey's funeral. They actually had one of their friend's son, who was an accomplished piano player, play on a grand piano in the church, Claire de Lune. Everybody was weeping. I was kind of looking around because it does bring out the emotions. And I said, she kept going on, Aggie, stop. Do you hear what's playing? And she's like, I gotta get out of here. Exactly as she says it. Claire de Lune, which they said was Rainey's favorite song. This is the first time since I've been back. Writing a book about coincidences I've been through. This is the biggest at first. This changed my opinion from being basically an atheist to believing in God. And it's a bunch of, I showed you another coincidence when we were meeting. This is like, my guess is someday you're going to call me and you're going to sing Claire de Lune played at this specific time, and you're going to have a coincidence with the song. But it's just, I was playing, and it's a beautiful song. Your mom had great taste. I mean, if I had been 10 seconds sooner, I would have missed her on the elevator 10 seconds later. And then the exact timing of her saying it, and then no, don't bring them up. They can take them to the synagogue. Thanks, Larissa. All right, we can make our way up now. So you have a choice of either going up the elevator or there's stairs. And I'm going to go up the stairs, but this is Julian from the cemetery over here. He'll help you all go on the elevator, any of you that wish to go. And you can follow me for the stairs.